The new channel. The new channel. Hashtag TNCNow.
The views, opinions, and insights expressed in the following shows are those of the host, producers, guests, and viewers. They do not necessarily reflect the position of the channel. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the new channel. Our passion transforms a community that sees all things new. I'm Nato Agbayani, streaming from Quezon City.
And I'm Arizza Nocum, and I'm streaming from San Mateo, Rizal.
So welcome and to hashtag para sa Bayan. See you in a while. Hello and welcome to All right, so we're here. We're having the hashtag para sa Bayan conversations on EDSA, looking back and moving forward. So it's a conversation. So basically, we will talk about what happened from my point of view as an eyewitness, and of course from the stories of parents through the eyes of Arizza later. So maybe I can start, Arizza.
I think it would be really great kasi as you know naman, majority of Filipinos now, they're in their youth, they're younger, in their teenage years, 20s, and they're coming into consciousness at a time when the memories of EDSA seem like so long ago. So I think it's necessary to keep talking about it. Kailangan pong paulit-ulit siyang pag-usapan because it's such a integral part of our history. And I would love to know more about your first-person perspective po kung ano po ba yung nangyari before and ano po yung pinagdaanan niyo po as personally and as a public advocate po at that time.
Okay. So maybe I can start when I was in high school. So this was 83. The assassination of Ninoy Aquino happened August 21, 1983. So we were in school and we were quite curious about what was happening. Remember that at this time there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, and there was no way media was controlled in general by the government. So you had Channel 9, you had it wasn't PTV4 before. So lahat ng media are controlled or censored. So we had to get our information from video recordings, mga Betamax. No? This Betamax video recordings was shared on secretly. So you would play it at home, and then this is what happened. This is the news that came out on foreign news, because you couldn't watch the foreign news in the Philippines. So I think it was the assassination, the entire footage was available in foreign media. So we got pirated copies of these, and these were distributed to the high school.
Okay.
So that's how we got our information, and it was not really it was so difficult because media was really controlled. So unlike now that you can rant and you can bash people in government. This was at the time that, remember, this was still martial law under
Yes. Yes.
President Marcos, the father, senior. So I know. So this was going around, and we were in high school, and I was in Claret, and a friend of mine. We were secretly watching these videos every now and then, I think as
Mm,
young kids, well, teenagers, we joined. There was this movement. It was called Justice for Aquino, Justice for All. So this was the first
mm,
of the movements triggered by 83. Remember that there are a lot of other movements prior to 83. Of course, there was the left of center. There were several organizations. Of course, the Bangsamoro struggle, which is, they've not been conquered, and even the
mm.
Cordillera people struggle. So all
Yes.
of these didn't start in 1983, but the main bulk of the here in NCR and in other key cities happened in 83. So the mobilization started. So people triggered primarily by the opposition. So the legal opposition was there. So they were protesting, and they were doing all these mass walkouts, protest rallies. So you could see a cross section of the ultra rich, the upper
Mm,
middle class, and the middle class joining these rallies
mm,
before. But eventually, Jaja and these were the more or less the social democrats. But the bigger force at this time, because the insurgency was still very strong, I think the NPA strength then was around 25,000 combatants. So this was a
mm.
lot. I mean,
Opo.
during that time, and the legal movements of the left began aligning with the social democrats in the middle class. So there was what you call united front work, and
Mm,
even the Bangsamoro organization started to align against the regime. So so we started to join the protest. A lot of it happened in Quezon City, Santo Domingo, and then I think, the biggest mobilization was the funeral march from to
yes.
Santo Domingo to where Ninoy Aquino was buried.
Yes,
So
I think I've seen photos of that book.
yeah, that was really that was the biggest mobilization leading to the February 21, 22, 23 EDSA Revolution. So that triggered a lot because after that it was really a sea of people. So I remember as a young boy we were taking pictures using this DSLR na film pa ang ginagamit.
Yes.
Tapos we were taking pictures because the idea was to document it and then to show it to our friends. So uh, parang that
Interesting.
when you pass by Quezon Avenue, where Santo Domingo is, the buildings weren't that tall yet. I think that the maximum was something like 20 floors maybe. But the confetti
Mm,
was really overwhelming. People were crying. It was really an emotional experience, and even the mobilizations in Makati. So it was really
mm,
the thing to join these mobilizations. Then eventually, um, the legal left. So organizations like Bayan, KMU, League
mm,
of Filipino Students, because they're really organized. I mean, the left was really, of course, they also had the armed component, and then the National Democratic Front. So they eventually realized that they had to align with the legal, shall we call, the middle class forces, no? Kasi ang dami na. So the church, so kami from Claret, we're a Catholic school, so a lot of the Catholic schools, o yun, lalo na yung mga St. Teresa's College, etc., they were joining already. So you would see the Colegialas with the Masang Filipino, with everybody joining in, and it was really a sight to see. And even the legal opposition or kasi syempre yung opposition, these are the politicians, no?
Yes.
From different so they were joining with mass movements of different groups
It's
of
really a multilateral movement.
yes, it was like
Different organizations, different interests, different
exactly, it was
stories of
multicultural.
struggle. Yeah.
Right. So, and you could see young people joining, so people like us, and there were people in media, so like publishers of Manila Chronicles, sila, and then directors, movie directors, sila Ben Cervantes, of course, the senators, Lorenzo Tañada, who else? Sila, nakita mo na yung yung teka, there's something wrong. So, I remember I grew up in a traditional church, and when I asked some elders, sabi ko, Elder Ariza, I have a question. Sabi ko, what's happening is so huge, how do you call it? Disturbing. So I asked, what is our role as Christians? Because we came from a traditional Christian church, and they said, no, our role is to save souls.
Okay.
So that was the time I said, I mean, not to discredit that church, no, but that was the time. I think I was 15 years old, or 15 or 16 years old, and I left, and I became a student activist because I was saying maybe we don't have the same God. Kasi I think the God I worship would be somebody who has compassion for the struggle of the masses. Sorry. It happened many years ago, 37 years ago. But it's so vivid to me.
Yes.
So, sorry not to be corny, but anyway. So, after the 3 years, grabe yun, massive na yung mga protests. So, it was happening all over. In Manila, it was happening in the key cities. It was really, hindi na mapigilan ng administrasyon. So, and then there were so many things happening all at the same time. So, in terms of the ability of the administration to control media, to control the military, di ba yun yung triumvirate, you have to control the people, the military, and the press. Hindi mo na ma-control yung people, you could control the press and the military, or to maintain power. So anyway, itong 86 was a culmination of so 3 years, di ba, namatay, inassassinate si Ninoy Aquino. Again, hindi to laban ng pamilya. It's not between the Aquinos and the Marcoses. I think it was really a struggle for freedom because our media was repressed at that time. No? So ang game plan ngayon iba na eh. You use trolls, you use different, because the media is much freer. So you use a different methodology. But during that time, wala ka talagang control sa media. So you had alternative media. You had Philippine Daily Inquirer started that way. Malaya started that way. These were publications. Mr. and Miss magazine started that way. So these were the protest, alternative media. And then also yung nagkaroon ng mga radio shows na nag-broadcast na, hindi na natakot. Sige, mag-broadcast na tayo. Pero they were hiding. Naka-air sa frequency, pero the government didn't know where they were. So,
okay.
Radyo Bandido. Anyway.
Radyo Bandido. Yes.
Basta. So anyway.
Tama po ba?
Si RJ he's a musician, but they also own RJ Music. Yes. So this was really parang ano na, grabe na yung movement, they couldn't help it anymore. So what happened was uh, we were, uso pa nun yung nagmo-mobile, so you go to a place, nagmo-mobile disco. So you're rented, and instead of being a band, you play disco music, something
Parang
in a
yung
party.
jukebox po.
No, it's yung dalawang turntables, di ba? Tapos you mix it.
Okay. May DJ.
So it's like EDM now, di ba? Yung
Yes.
electronic dance music. But before, it was like using turntable. So we were in a group that was doing that. So when we got to EDSA, I think that was 6 a.m. Tapos na kami magligpit. We came from Parañaque, so it was 6 a.m. And then you're wondering why there were so many people. So we found out nag-defect na nga yung
Senator
Department of
Enrique.
National Defense, si Enrile and si Ramos, defected already to the opposition or to the EDSA People Power Group, no? So wala pang Robinson's Galleria, so doon nangyari yung harangan ng tangke. So from the armored division of the military, tumuloy sila to try and stop or disperse yung EDSA. Remember the size of EDSA from Camp Aguinaldo, kanto ng Boni Serrano up to Robinson's Galleria. That was filled with people.
Wow.
So you can just imagine the numbers. So dina-downplay nila. Pero ganun karami talaga because nilakad ko yun eh. From the corner hanggang Robinson's Galleria. So from where the shrine is. So that was how many people there were on EDSA. And then simultaneous movements in the provinces like Davao and Cebu, people were protesting, and even in the north. So ano na talaga hindi na mapigil ng administration at that time. So what I can say is, again, it's not a family feud between the Aquinos and the Marcoses. Remember, when you talk about the events prior to martial law was declared in 1972.
Yes.
So a lot of organizations in 1972 went underground. So meaning in UP, for example, just to give you an idea, since you cannot assemble kung more than 3 people kayo. So tayo, Ariza, tayong tatlo kasama si Direk, hindi tayo pwedeng mag-public assembly. Otherwise, we would be questioned or arrested. So nangyayari, for example, sa UP and in the campuses, the activists would put up mga basketball championships.
League. Opo, liga.
So they could gather.
Grabe.
So they could gather, and doon na nagbibigay ng mga leaflets, doon na nag-organize, because they could meet in one big place. So that's how it was done, no? And then a lot of young people, of course, went underground and joined the armed struggle. So a lot of them coming from the universities, the fraternities, not just in UP, but in many universities, lalo na sa Vismin din, a lot of people went underground. And I know this because we were trying to document the entire thing from 1972 up to today. Yung activist movements, no? So hindi siya nangyari ng 83. Ninoy Aquino was just the trigger.
Yes.
But the movement was way back. In fact, the labor movements as early as in the 20s, in the 30s, the Sakdalistas, the Hukbalak. As far as the left is concerned, that's connected. We never, parang 1898, natalo tayo sa armed struggle against the US, naging Commonwealth country tayo. As far as the left is concerned, hindi natigil yun. Hanggang binuo yung, Kabataan Makabayan was formed in 1964. Yung Kabataan Makabayan is the precursor of the the National Democratic Front and the NPA. So, legal pa yung KM nun, di ba? Legal pa siya nun. So, a lot of people joined that, both in the universities and even mga Bangsamoro youth joined also ang KM. But in 72, that went underground, which further strengthened the insurgency. Of course, there were other movements, no, yung SDK, these were the Social Democrats and the Democratic Socialists or the Socialists na nakikibaka na or you're already struggling against the government. So yung 86, mali rin naman sabihin na it was just a middle class struggle or it was just the middle class who triggered it. So it was really a combination of, like what you said, multi-sectoral organizations, groups of people, various political persuasions na felt that was the right time. Now, syempre, of course, we are now in another Marcos administration. I'm not saying that they are the same. I'm not saying that the sins of the father are the sins of the son. But what I'm saying is, we cannot discount the fact that EDSA was a critical part of the history of the country.
Yes.
And the world.
Yes.
Yun yung offline, di ba, we were saying, sabi ko, ang EDSA triggered, and this is a known fact, triggered the movements in Russia, triggered the movements in East
Germany.
Yung operation movements ng, and the downfall of the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
So, yung movement ng Solidarność, even partly yung struggle nila Nelson Mandela, because they saw it could be done. It could be done peacefully.
Yes.
Kasi, di ba? Of course, ang gusto ng left, ng underground left, talagang manalo via armed struggle.
Yes.
That's why lakas-lakas nila noon. They had 25,000 combatants. Well, I mean, imagine now that's reduced because there's a direct relationship between insurgency, poverty, and problems of society. But I've spoken too much already. I think it's later I'll kwento again. Sorry pagka ganyan talaga, pagka medyo mga not sure na yung kausap mo.
I think
kwento. So anyway, Arizza, what did your parents tell you? How do the Gen Zs feel now about EDSA?
Well, before that po, I want to thank you for sharing that very vivid description of what you've gone through. And I can tell po that it's not just a recounting of facts, it's really you telling your personal story. And I can really feel the emotions po. And it's almost as if you're describing it, parang natatransport po tayo back to that time.
Parang therapy.
Parang ano po, catharsis.
No, catharsis, yeah.
Before I can share about what my perception was growing up, I wanted to ask, ano po kaya yung main lessons learned niyo po from that whole experience and recognizing as well what has happened between then and now?
Siguro yung context ng yung criticality, if you call it that, of press freedom. Now, we cannot give it up because remember that we are now in a parallel universe or a multiverse.
Yeah.
In our universe today, freedom media is too free. Diba? Kaya kaya the kids now, I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying they don't maybe appreciate the freedom because it was fought for with blood. I mean, people really died for our freedom. So I think hindi natin nakita because yung EDSA Revolution was peaceful itself. But the desperacidos, the people who died, the young college students who were dinukot, how do you call that, kidnapped and were never seen again, the farmers, mga manggagawa, mga magsasaka, kabataan, mga professionals na nawala because of fighting for this freedom. So, and then number two, you cannot fool everybody all the time.
Mm.
What's that saying na ano, well,
The truth
in
comes out.
yeah, di
Yeah.
ba? The truth comes out, it will come out. I'm not, right now, ako, of course, I was really anti regime that time. But right now, I'm siguro because I'm older, I'm more understanding of the historical contexts. For example, but my first job in college, after college, was in government as well. So my boss was a Marcos loyalist.
Mm.
My first boss, he was with the Ministry of Human Settlements.
Mm.
My second boss was also a shall we call a Marcos loyalist. And
Mm.
he told me, sabi niya, Nato, if you were in power, would you have given that power in a silver platter? Sabi ko, no, sir. Sabi niya, that's exactly what we did. So,
Mm.
alam mo yan, yung mga ganong insights, I don't think they would have given up power. Kaya, and sa revolution, di ba, nakakagulo na. They wouldn't give it
Yes.
up because that's how, let's call a spade a spade. That's how dictators behave. And
Yes.
ano, talaga, I mean, sa buong mundo, ganun yun. They will not give up power easily. But again, um, the power of the people, at the end of the day, when they know the truth and they want to fight for it, they can get it. Di ba?
Mm.
And talaga, you cannot repress a people that's really, kasi ano, Arisa, that was, ang tagal na eh, from martial law 72. That was a
Mm.
real long time. And I don't fault it to the old man, no? But all of it, marami ding enablers.
Mm.
People who enabled it to happen, diba? So we need to fight also the enablers
The
uh,
system.
the
Mm.
system that does that also. So yun.
Mm.
Ako, no? Lapit na, tas break na tayo.
Yeah,
Sige, go
well,
ahead.
yung experience ko naman po and the perception of, I guess, people my age in their 20s growing up was, um, well, the first experience is, I guess, the one you see for yourself, which is when we were kids, we saw EDSA DOS happening, EDSA Tres happening. And honestly, at
Why,
that
how
age,
old are you?
I think parang around elementary school po.
Yeah. EDSA
Parang,
DOS.
yes. So parang EDSA DOS and EDSA Tres. So parang hindi mo masyadong maiintindihan kung ano yung nangyayari at that time. But you understand that there was a change of power. You know, somebody
Right.
was taking the power over somebody else, and
Correct.
the person who was there in that position before did something wrong, and that's why they're being removed from that position. So somehow, um, parang the the understanding of EDSA wasn't really about like what happened, but how it happened. Na parang EDSA was really about people coming together, the people you see on the streets, people from different walks of life, uniting to make something happen that they want to happen.
Right.
And my dad, who was a journalist, he was actually covering those religiously because he was working for the Inquirer that time.
PDI siya before.
Yes, yes, opo.
Oh, okay. Parang
Yes,
kaya pala, sounds familiar.
ayun.
Okay.
And I guess growing up and as the history of the nation is taught in school, you get a better understanding of what EDSA is all about. And kasi, di ba po yung history natin, pag tinuro sa atin yung kasaysayan, kasi you start from indigenous or
Right.
pre-colonial times in the Philippines, and then you go to when the Spaniards were here, and then you go to when the Americans were here. And then after that, you go to the modern government. And then the most important thing that's happened in recent time is still the EDSA People Power in
Right.
1986. So parang there's the Philippines before EDSA and there's the Philippines after EDSA. So it's still really that significant na parang pag yung last part talaga ng kasaysayan class, which is usually taught like in the last quarter, it's usually about EDSA and you see all these photos. And
Right.
it's interesting because we grew up during a time where there was a lot of optimism. I remember in 2008, that's the year I was in high school, and that's the year when Barack Obama won as president in the U.S. And there was so much hope, not just in the Philippines, but also around the world. Parang the internet was becoming more universal, so people were finding their voice there. There were these platforms where suddenly you can connect with so many people from different parts of the world. And then there was also a growing population of young people, so there was all this energy and all this excitement. And then you would see people like Barack Obama, and even in the Philippines, parang nararamdaman po yung parang mas maraming gumiginhawa yung buhay around that time. And I think it lasted, until there were more economic struggles, and now you see more authoritarian states taking over. So parang that EDSA spirit para sa akin po, that EDSA spirit from 1986 lasted until around the late 2000s or early 2010s. And then now we're more in a period of pessimism, in a period of getting in touch with reality and the challenges of maintaining a democratic state and maintaining a more parang equitable world order. And now even the things that seemed promising, like democracy, like the economy, like this whole idea about having sustainable businesses, and even the internet, parang these things that seem promising are now also showing their ugly head, na hindi po pala sila overall puro positive lang. Meron din palang mga negatives, and those negatives can actually erode society and its values more than the other things that have happened in the past, like ito pong internet, and how polarization and the divisiveness, the use of trolls, fake news, propaganda have been really separating people into black and white, when in reality hindi naman po talaga dapat ganon. So for me, when I think about EDSA, and I think people from my generation, it's basically talking about that period of optimism and unity that is not so hindi na po siya ganun ka ramdam ngayon. Parang ngayon we're moving more into more pessimism, more for recognition of the realities of inequality, na kahit nagkaroon ng EDSA, bakit ang dami pa rin mahirap ng mga Pilipino? Bakit ganyan pa rin yung MRT? Bakit hindi pa rin naayos yung mga basic things like agrarian reform, which should have happened after EDSA when President Cory Aquino took over. So parang it showed so much promise. But I guess, and also that's the reason why a lot of these kinds of sentiments came up nito pong past elections, is because there were promises stated by EDSA which were not fulfilled. And I think interesting po yung sinabi nyo kanina na some of the groups that were most active during EDSA were the middle class to upper middle class and higher. Kasi I think a lot of the frustrations coming after EDSA were from the lower classes C, D, E, and I think that's still very much felt today. Kaya siguro po ito yung struggle ngayon, na having had that period of hope and promise, how can we keep it alive para hindi po tayo magkakaroon ng parang, say, a lack of hope? Kasi I think ngayon there's still so much that could be done in the country and in the world today. And without something like EDSA, without the spirit of EDSA, what other things can help us to keep moving forward, keep improving, keep growing, and keep learning over our past experiences, our past histories, aside from EDSA, as you said po. And yeah, siguro po we can explore that more later, no? Paano na po tayo mag-move forward? We now have President Marcos in Malacanang again, so the Marcos family there again. We now have a lot of the problems that we had before during EDSA, but now parang magnified maybe, because there's hundreds, there's tens of millions more Filipinos, and it's also the degree of economic inequality. I often feel also parang mas drastic, na bakit sobrang konti lang ng percentage ng mga Pilipino na sobrang yaman, and then the rest of us are still struggling. So siguro po we can explore that later, na how to draw from our past experiences and the stories you've shared to make it into still something positive given the realities that we have today.
So on that note, parang ayaw kitang pigilan. Because it's so interesting what you're saying. No? I mean, from a utopian future to a dystopian na we're
Medyo ganun po.
ganun yung feels, no? So anyway, we'll go right back after this short break, and we'll have another interesting discussion, and of course, Ariza, our co-host, and yours truly, in a while. So break muna tayo, and then we'll see each other
See you
in a while.
later.
All right, see you later. Bayan here on the new channel. Don't forget to watch our other shows here on the new channel. So, all right. So the new channel is an online alternative new media platform of online shows for people on the go. Please watch all our shows as seen on the screen. Imagine having your own show, your own playlist, your own content, but we make it easier for you. TNC aims to transform the lives of our viewers through engaging, authentic, original content. Our channel is a 24/7 responsible global platform that showcases Filipino talent, global influencers, cultural intelligence, and ingenuity. TNC aims to, of course, have the engaging, authentic, and original content. Don't forget also to watch hashtag Para sa Bayan with Nato Agbayani and Arizza Nocum every Saturdays at 9 p.m. All right.
Ayan. Welcome back po.
So,
It's been
so
an
we're back.
emotional and very quite heavy conversation. So,
Back.
siguro po from what you heard, Sir Nato, earlier, you were talking about your experience and how it was really an amassing of people from different backgrounds, different, all fighting, not necessarily against us regime, but really fighting for their freedom, as you said po. And then I also talked about po how how it's taught and how it was presented to us and how we perceived it. Parang it's really a symbol of hope. And parang yung hope na yon, we don't quite feel that it's being fulfilled yet, or we're not yet at the stage where we can say na lahat ng pinangarap natin after EDSA na pagbabago, na pag-unlad ay natupad. Kaya nandito pa po tayo ngayon, and maybe it's not necessarily ground zero or step one, but we're still a long way ahead to go to say that, the Philippines at a stage na marami pong nag-e-enjoy ng kaunlaran at mga benefits na ma-offer ng bansang to. So, siguro po, yung question ko sa inyo ngayon is, ano po yung nakikita nyong maybe changes or anything that you see as critical as lessons that we've learned from before na magagamit na po natin ngayon to show that this is the way forward?
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of our administrations are 6 years, 6 years, 6 years, diba? The presidents come 6 years, 6 years, 6 years. It goes to show us that planning for development in the Philippines, kasi nangyari, Cory, FDR, ERAP, GMA, and then, who else? Tapos, seems to be, parang nung Duterte administration, there was this frustration na, teka, ba't ba natin sineselebrate yung EDSA? Parang wala namang nangyari since then. And then, it's the same nung campaign ni BBM. Parang meron ding, let's say it na lang, no? Let's call a spade a spade. Pero merong parang allergic reaction to EDSA and that period of our history, So parang feeling ko, at the end of the day, we cannot rely on the presidents. I mean, number one lesson, it's not. Remember, this is the struggle for development of the country is a whole of country. It has to be a whole of country, not just a presidential candidate. Kasi ganun yung tendency parang ako yung pag-asa ng bayan or yung administrasyon ko pag nakaupo ako yung pag-asa ng bayan. Pero the reality is half of the resources of government is in the executive. So if, for example, we have 5 trillion pesos in our budget, half of that goes to the executive, to the office of the president. Which is totoo naman, no? Napakalaking papel ng presidente because he controls half of that. Now, ano ba yung development? Paano ba tayo dapat magplano? Paano ba tayo na hindi nakabatay sa hindi nakabatay sa presidente?
Yes.
Kasi right now, when I do some mentoring for some clients, it's really, when you think of an idea or you think of a structure or something you have to do, think of 50 years ahead. 50 years ahead. Kasi mabilis lang yung 10 years Kita mo to 37 years. And we are now here. And our population, when you do projections, you do it for 50 years, lalo na in governance. You cannot be short-sighted and do it medium-term plan. Ganun yung palagi nangyayari. Medium-term plan ng pamahalaan for the next 6 years under the Duterte administration, under the Marcos administration. But the reality is, ang dami nang nangyayari. Lalo na ngayon, we are talking about AI that really, it can do both ways. It can help us and it can also do something else, like the internet. Somehow yung information na democratized, but you can weaponize the internet at the same time. So I think the basics have to be there. We need to modernize agriculture, number one. We need to modernize education because that's the baseline.
Yes, agree.
We're putting a lot of budget in DepEd. But we also need to put a lot of budget in agriculture because baseline to yung kailangan talaga baguhin mo yung sistema, yung mindset, everything. It has to be something systemic because remember, food production, food production number one. Education. When I say education, yung not just DepEd but the entire
ecosystem of education, including like values formation.
Yeah, then the human resource. Kasi we have 100 million people, according to Dr. Bernie Villegas, ang laki ng potential because we have a very young population, 24.
Yes.
middle, and then what does that tell you? That tells you that there's so many young people, we are underdeveloped kasi ang dami rin kabataan na wala ring
Opportunities and
opportunities, etc. So you
skills,
need
I
that
guess, to
opportunity,
get
right?
ahead. Yeah.
Then I think entrepreneurship, of
Yes.
course, sciences. We need to do a lot about the math and science track of the entire country because
Yeah.
uh, that
Agree.
that will sorry ang daldal ko.
Yes, go lang po.
Pero the way I see it, that will really change the game for us. Kasi ang sabi ng HSBC, prior to the pandemic, we will be the 16th largest economy by 2050. So the pandemic set us back by several years. Pero it's still doable if we're able to sustain that. And it's not going to happen. I mean, kahit na ekonomista yung presidente, it's not going to happen with just the president. But again, critical din yung gobyerno kasi they control resources that can spur the growth of. I mean, if they put the budget in the right places, and then remember our corruption levels are at how much? So, for example, you are buying you're selling a ball pen that's 10 pesos. Pagdating sa municipal hall yan or city hall, I'm not generalizing. Ang cost niyan is 2 pesos, 2 pesos and 10 centavos. Naintindihan mo, Riza? So,
Yes.
so if you buy, for example, a 1 million peso worth na car or equipment, that's 2.1 million
Yeah.
when purchased. So
Yeah.
those are the corruption levels. Now we're cutting 50% of the, let's say 2 trillion yung budget, 1 trillion na kaagad yung napunta sa corruption. Diba? So, sayang, ang laking sayang eh. So we also need, ako, I think, personally, I came in government at 19 years old. I was public information officer for Marikina. And then I think, we need to, Secretary Singson did something good sa DPWH. He recruited a lot of young people in the Department of Public Works and Highways during the time of Pinoy. But, ano yun eh, iba yung energy, iba yung talino, yung galing ng mga bata. I mean, of course, the older people can mentor, they have the experience, but then again, the energy of our young people should transcend dito sa ating pamahalaan. I mean, the public sector needs young people talaga to also change the game. Hindi lang dito sa taas. Kasi remember, presidente, ang secretary ng isang department is presidential appointee, ang USEC, presidential appointee, ang ASEC, assistant secretaries, they can be appointees pa rin. But the career down there, yun yung kailangan mo i-retool.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah. I agree with you. When you were talking about how we should be relying less on presidents and individual figures, parang it reminded me po on how we have to remove ourselves from that messianic perspective na there's only one person to save us. That person is the Messiah, and that person will do everything to change the fabric of this nation. Parang hindi po talaga
Only one Messiah.
dapat nandun po tayo more sa bayanihan values natin na kailangan natin pagtulungan, kailangan natin ng unity. And I know that alam niyo po yung di ba po yung campaign slogan ni President Marcos was unity. And of course, there were a lot of criticisms against that. But as somebody working from the peace sector, I do agree that that's one thing that we do need. A lot more of that unity, a lot more of that solidarity. First, understanding pa rin the weaknesses in the system that prevents real unity. But still, we need that unity. So siguro po for me, moving forward, since we're reaching the tail end of our show, grabe ang bilis po.
Yes.
Yeah, when we're talking about the past, I think tayo pong mga Pilipino, we need to do a better job of addressing the failures and mistakes that have happened in the past. Kasi ito pong EDSA, people see it as a failure, people see it as a success, but there's so many other important events, like you mentioned po, so many other different struggles that hindi po napapag-usapan as often as EDSA. And as somebody with family coming from Mindanao, parang sa akin po, ang dami din pong armed struggles, ang dami din pong revolution happening in Mindanao that you never find being celebrated. Wala pong anniversary, but there are still revolutions all the same that can teach us something about our culture. And parang for me, I hope we have the same passion for EDSA as we have the same passion about the struggle against the Spanish, the struggle against the Americans, the struggle by the Bangsamoro people, like you mentioned, and even the struggle of different groups like women and LGBT community, and all of these other parang struggles and revolutions that are equally important. So, yun lang po sana yung nakikita ko sa history natin. And, di ba po tayo as people, we're always asked to learn from our mistakes. And I do think we should be doing a better job at that. Kasi, sa Germany, di ba, they had the Holocaust during World War II. And now, they make it a point to teach the Holocaust to every German student such that they will really know what happened, the real numbers, the facts, and what has been the impact of that. And there are some laws in Germany na like bawal talaga, for instance, to do the Nazi salute in public. You could be imprisoned for that. So, and you can't also deny what has happened, deny the Holocaust. There are also rules and laws against that. So, if we really want to change, if we really want to stay true to what has really happened to the Philippines, we have to do a better job at that nga po, to really look at our mistakes, look at the specters, the ghosts that haunt us, and look them in the eyes and not deny them and not change the story. So for me, yun po. And this is not just true for EDSA. This is also true for all the presidents and the administrations after. Kasi lahat naman po ng administrations na yun had their own faults. Like for instance, under President Cory Aquino and the problem with having real agrarian reform, or even ito pong with President Duterte or even President Noynoy Aquino, all of them had faults that we could learn from, not just EDSA and not just former President Marcos.
Yeah.
So, dapat po sana we go beyond EDSA and we also go beyond, like you said po, this Marcos versus Aquino, kasi the whole of Philippine history has so much more to offer than these
That's
two.
right. And then I think at the end of the day, there's learnings from each administration as well. So there were like benchmarks or things that they did well that we can do better. I mean, moving forward. But ganun Riza, grabe. Like our problems now are much more complex than in 86, and compounded by, of course, debt and all those other things. And then, in the same manner that we have a young population, it's also a problem because it seems that our young population nowadays are also having a lot of problems with mental health, with poverty, with vice,
employment.
Everything. So, diba? And then also skills. There's so many people without skills. So the teaching, the learning, the development, we still have a long way to go. But in some areas, of course, where our middle class is expanding, but after COVID, medyo nagka-problema din tayo dyan. You know why? More people have pets now.
Yeah.
And people are, yung spend sa pet food, lumalaki. So imagine that before this was basic needs. Even the people na nagkakariton, they have pets. So I mean, well, it shows you Filipinos have empathy, but it also shows you it's an indicator that the middle class is growing. But that doesn't say that the poverty level or the poor are totally, of course, the poor is still there, and there's so much more we need to do to address that particular issue, in terms of, getting them out of poverty. It can be done. It's been done in other countries. We can do it as a country. I think you're right. The optimism of EDSA, or the optimism of being a citizen, siguro nawala din yun. Parang naging we are more individualistic now because of Facebook din. Parang we need to do a selfie. We need to, it's really, it's really centered on the self.
Yeah.
So
And
maybe,
sa akin po, ano rin eh, I think we also need to celebrate more of the successes din. Di ba po sa scientific method, ako po kasi when you're talking about science and technology and research earlier, I'm a graduate of a science high school. And sa scientific method, it's really like a long process where you have these experiments and you learn what works, you learn what doesn't, and if you see something that works, you test it, you scale it, you replicate it until it becomes a more established theory. So dapat po ganun din yung process natin eh. We're constantly testing new ideas, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and then dun sa mga ideas na nag-work, we're replicating them, we're scaling them, and this is so useful, especially sa setting that we have so many LGUs who have
right,
fund and power over their own communities.
resources.
Yes, if we have one successful idea in Quezon City, then it should be something replicated to other cities or municipalities. And if there's one from, say, in Sulu, then that should be also replicated across the
Right.
country. So actually, ang dami po ding good things that have happened in the past, I believe, that deserve our praise as well. And not just EDSA as that emblem of hope, but also a lot of other things. And siguro po, because we're talking about, symbols here, one thing I think that is lacking is when you ask a Filipino what they think about the past, they talk about events like EDSA. But when you ask a Filipino what they imagine for themselves in the future, parang hindi po ganun ka solid yung vision natin. Wala po tayong parang shared collective vision. If you remember po in the 1960s, the Americans wanted to bring a man to the moon, and everybody knew that. From the astronaut that was actually planning to go to the moon to the janitor that was working in NASA. And that's also happened in other countries na, okay, maybe in Singapore, kunwari, our neighbor, na I think when they were working towards it, like Lee Kuan Yew and all the people around him, they knew that 10 years from now, 20 years, 30 years from now, gusto ko ganito kami. At sana din, if EDSA was our past emblem of hope, or at least that's how I see it, we also have a new vision that we can all agree on and that we can all start building on. So siguro po yun yung next challenge sa atin. What's our next sort of quote-unquote EDSA?
That's right. I think you're right. We need to have a shared vision as a country. Here on Para sa Bayan, we try to invite guests who have those visions, who have those, to really, kasi tama ka eh, there's so many good stories, there's so many good things that's happening. I mean, even, sorry, nanggaling ako from, I was in government in different capacities, from Cory Aquino to Pinoy, and then maybe now, I don't know how, pero maraming successes eh. Na you're right, the scientific method should be used more because ang Filipino emotional, etc., etc., and maybe we should have more scientists than politicians. Sa totoo lang. Diba?
Merkel, she's a chemist. And see, how Germany has gone with the leadership of the EU now.
Yeah, exactly. So we need more people who have the vision, less of themselves. We need less political families. We need individual achievers who have achieved in their respective fields. Kasi pag political families, wala kang choice but, to protect your interest as a family. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying that it could be better. There's so much opportunity. Actually, nung time na yon, nung 86, there's so many Filipinos who are talented. Kailangan ba isang tao lang yung mag-shine? Or isang tao lang, ang dami-dami. We have people like you, Ariza, and there's how many of you, di ba? Young
Marami.
people who can make a difference, di ba? That's my point. So,
Oo.
this show, mag-overtime na tayo. This show, para sa bayan is really to tell those stories, to,
Yes.
to give that optimism, and maybe somebody somewhere, someone out there who's watching will also be hindi na siya maging apathetic. He will have compassion for his own country and do his best to change that. So it's so short. Wala lang 2 hours atin, Alisa. So anyway, I'd like to thank you for your insights, and we'd like to thank the audience for listening to our experiences, our eyewitness account of EDSA, and what happened to the people, the revolutionary movement that happened prior to EDSA, and the revolution that's still happening now. And that's the revolution that we should do. I mean, make this country first world nation, and uh, everything. When I say first world, everything else there.
Hmm.
We are no longer the laggard. We're no longer because we have that capacity. Remember that our Asian neighbors studied all here in UP, UPLB. The Indonesian studied. The Indonesian economists studied in UP economics. The agriculturists studied in UP LB and CLSU and everybody.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm not just saying UP. All the other universities, ang daming nag-aral dito na coming from different countries. Na tinuruan natin, no? Why can't we have that why can't we be fervently going towards the development of the country and not just leaving it behind? Diba?
Yes.
So
Agree.
yeah, that's about it. That's all the time that we have. Thank you.
And thank
Um,
you as well, sir, for sharing your story.
yeah,
It's really inspiring to hear about your first-hand perspective and to know that you're still very much in touch with that part of our history.
so sa mga viewers, maraming salamat po for watching our EDSA episode. I know it's not fashionable to talk about EDSA these days, but it is a historical fact, and it will always be. And remember that this EDSA changed the world as we know it today. So why not do the same for the Philippines? No? Why not? Kayo mga viewers, let's do it again for the Philippines. Not just EDSA, but the spirit of EDSA, that is hope, sabi nga ni Ariza, hope, and the faith in the Filipino. It doesn't matter whose administration it is, but we need to have faith in the Filipino and really have that shared vision. So that's our takeaway for tonight. Everyone, thank you for watching Para sa Bayan. God bless you all. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
See you
everyone.
next time.
Yes, bye-bye.